Welcome to 40 minutes of peaceful Honda knowledge. Find your most comfortable position. Adjust your pillow. Pull the blankets to just the right height. Take a slow, deep breath in. Hold it for a moment and release it slowly, feeling your shoulders drop and relax. Let's begin our peaceful journey through the history of Honda. Soichiro Honda was born in 1906 in a small village in rural Japan. His father was a blacksmith who also repaired bicycles. Young Soichiro grew up surrounded by tools and mechanical work. He watched his father fix things, learning that with patience and skill, almost anything could be repaired. This early exposure to mechanical work shaped his entire life. As a boy, Soichiro was more interested in machines than in schoolwork. He wasn't a good student in the traditional sense. Reading and writing didn't capture his imagination the way engines did. When he was 8 years old, he saw his first automobile. A Ford Model T drove through his village, and young Soichiro chased it for miles, fascinated by this mechanical marvel. The smell of gasoline and oil from that Ford stayed with him. Years later, he said that whenever he smelled gasoline, he remembered that day and his determination to work with engines. That single encounter with an automobile set the direction for his entire life. He knew, even as a young boy, that he wanted to work with machines. At age 15, Soichiro left school in his village to become an apprentice at an automotive repair shop in Tokyo. The year was 1922, and Tokyo was a bustling modern city, vastly different from his rural village. The shop, called Art Shokai, repaired and tuned cars for wealthy customers. Young Honda swept floors, cleaned tools, and watched mechanics work. For the first year, he wasn't allowed to touch the cars. He could only observe and clean. This frustrated him intensely. He wanted to work on engines, not sweep floors. But this period of observation taught him to watch carefully and learn by seeing. He studied how the experienced mechanics approach problems. He memorized the location of every tool. He learned by watching, absorbing knowledge even when he wasn't actively working. Eventually, he was given small tasks: cleaning spark plugs, checking tire pressure, simple maintenance work. He approached even these basic tasks with intense focus, determined to do them perfectly. His dedication impressed his employer, who gradually gave him more responsibility. By his early 20s, Soichiro was a skilled mechanic, capable of repairing and tuning the most advanced cars of the era. In 1928, at age 22, he returned to his hometown and opened a branch of Art Shokai with his employer's support. He was now running his own repair shop, serving customers in the region where he grew up. The boy who had left school at 15 was now a successful businessman. But repairing cars wasn't enough for Honda. He wanted to build things, to create rather than just repair. He became interested in piston rings, the metal rings that seal the pistons inside the engine cylinders. Making quality piston rings required metallurgical knowledge that Honda didn't have. Rather than give up, he enrolled in technical school to study metallurgy. He attended classes at night while running his repair shop during the day. His determination to learn whatever was necessary to achieve his goals became a defining characteristic. Honda eventually established a company to manufacture piston rings, supplying Toyota and other manufacturers. But World War II intervened. His factory was destroyed by bombing. After the war, Japan was devastated. There was little gasoline, few vehicles, and widespread poverty. It seemed an unlikely time to start a vehicle company. But Honda saw opportunity where others saw only difficulty. In 1946, post-war Japan was struggling. Cities were in ruins. Industry was destroyed. People had little money, and transportation was difficult. Trains were overcrowded. Cars were luxuries that almost no one could afford. Most people walked or used bicycles. Soichiro Honda saw this problem and began thinking about a solution. Honda purchased military surplus engines that had been designed for portable generators and radio equipment. These small two-stroke engines had been built for military, but were now unwanted surplus, selling for almost nothing. Honda attached these engines to bicycles, creating motorized bicycles. They weren't sophisticated, but they worked. These motorized bicycles could travel much farther than regular bicycles with much less effort. For people who needed to commute to work or travel to markets, they were revolutionary. Honda could barely keep up with demand. People were desperate for affordable transportation, and his motorized bicycles provided it. He called them Bata Bata for the sound the engines made. But the military surplus engines soon ran out. Honda needed to design and build his own engines. In 1947, he created the Honda A-Type engine, a simple 50 cubic centimeters two-stroke engine designed specifically for bicycles. It was crude and not very powerful, but it was affordable and reliable. More importantly, it was Honda's own design, not a copy of something else. Production began in 1948. The complete motorized bicycle, called the Honda Model A, sold for surprisingly little. Workers who previously spent hours commuting could now travel the same distance in a fraction of the time. Farmers could get to markets more easily. Students could commute to schools. Honda's motorized bicycles weren't just transportation. They were tools that improved people's lives. Honda realized he needed business expertise to complement his engineering skills. In 1949, he recruited Takeo Fujisawa, a businessman with marketing and financial expertise. Honda would handle engineering and production. Fujisawa would handle business, marketing, and finance. This partnership proved crucial to Honda's success. Honda was a brilliant engineer, but not a natural businessman. Fujisawa provided the skills Honda lacked. Together, they established Honda Motor Company in 1948. The name itself was bold. Calling a motor company when they were building motorized bicycles showed Honda's ambition. He wasn't content to build motorized bicycles forever. He had larger dreams, but he was willing to start small and build gradually. The Honda Dream Type D, introduced in 1949, was Honda's first complete motorcycle rather than a bicycle with an engine attached. It had a purpose-built frame designed for the engine rather than being adapted from a bicycle. The 98 cubic centimeters two-stroke engine produced 3 horsepower. That doesn't sound like much today, but it was enough to carry a rider at 30 miles per hour, which seemed remarkably fast. The Dream was more refined than the motorized bicycles. It had better suspension, better brakes, and more reliable operation. It established Honda's reputation for building quality products. While other manufacturers were still building crude motorized bicycles, Honda was building real motorcycles. The difference in quality was obvious to anyone who rode them. Sales grew rapidly. By 1950, Honda was producing hundreds of motorcycles per month. The company expanded its factory and hired more workers. Demand seemed limitless. Post-war Japan was recovering, and people needed transportation. Honda's reliable, affordable motorcycles met that need perfectly. The company that had started in a small workshop was becoming a significant manufacturer. But Honda wasn't satisfied with the domestic market. He had bigger ambitions. He wanted to build the best motorcycles in the world and sell them worldwide. This seemed like an impossible dream for a small Japanese company. Japan's reputation for manufacturing was poor. Japanese products were considered cheap and low quality. Breaking into foreign markets would be incredibly difficult. Honda's response to this challenge was characteristic. If Japanese motorcycles had a poor reputation, he would build motorcycles so good that the reputation would change. He would prove that Japanese products could match or exceed anything built elsewhere. Quality would overcome prejudice. It was an audacious plan, but Honda had the determination to make it work. Soichiro Honda believed that racing proved engineering excellence. If your motorcycles could win races against the best competition, that demonstrated superior engineering. Racing also pushed development forward. The challenges of racing revealed weaknesses that needed improvement. Every race was a test, and every problem that appeared in racing could be solved before it affected customers. In 1954, Honda made a bold announcement. The company would compete in the Isle of Man TT races, the most prestigious motorcycle races in the world. The Isle of Man TT had been held since 1907 and was considered the ultimate test of motorcycle performance and reliability. The world's best manufacturers competed there. For a small Japanese company to announce plans to compete seemed almost comical to European observers. Honda didn't just want to participate. He wanted to win. He publicly stated that Honda would win the Isle of Man TT within 5 years. People thought he was delusional. Japanese motorcycles couldn't compete with British, Italian, and German machines that had decades of racing development behind them. But Honda was serious. He assembled a team of engineers and gave them a clear goal: build a motorcycle that could win at Isle of Man. The team studied European racing motorcycles, tried to understand what made them fast. They bought examples of the best motorcycles from Europe and disassembled them, measuring every component, studying every design detail. They weren't copying. They were learning. Understanding how others solved problems gave them a foundation to develop their own solutions. Honda's first attempt at Isle of Man in 1959 was unsuccessful. The motorcycles finished but didn't win. But Honda learned valuable lessons. The engines were powerful enough, but reliability was poor. Components failed under the extreme stress of racing. European manufacturers had decades of experience building racing engines. Honda was learning through trial and error, but Honda was a fast learner. In 1961, Honda won the Isle of Man TT in multiple classes. Just 5 years after announcing the goal, Honda had achieved it. The victory shocked the motorcycle world. A Japanese manufacturer had beaten the best European motorcycles on their home territory. It was a turning point, not just for Honda, but for the perception of Japanese manufacturing worldwide. Racing success translated to commercial success. Customers understood that if Honda could win the most demanding races, their street motorcycles must be well engineered. Racing victories provided credibility that advertising couldn't buy. Honda's reputation grew rapidly. The company that Europeans had dismissed as a minor Japanese manufacturer was now respected worldwide. Honda continued racing, winning championships in multiple classes. The racing program was expensive, but it paid dividends in engineering knowledge and brand reputation. Lessons learned in racing, better metallurgy, improved combustion chamber designs, more efficient cooling, transferred to street motorcycles. Racing wasn't just marketing. It was research and development conducted in the most demanding conditions possible. The company also developed a culture of continuous improvement. Engineers were encouraged to question everything, to ask why things were done a certain way and whether there might be a better approach. This culture came directly from Soichiro Honda himself, who was never satisfied with good enough. He demanded excellence and pushes engineers to achieve it. Honda's engineering philosophy emphasized originality. He didn't want to copy competitors. He wanted to develop unique solutions. When faced with a problem, Honda engineers were expected to think creatively and develop their own answers. This sometimes led to unconventional solutions, but it also led to innovations that competitors hadn't considered. The racing program continued for decades, establishing Honda as a dominant force in motorcycle racing. World championships accumulated. By the 1960s and 70s, Honda was the manufacturer to beat in motorcycle racing. The small Japanese repair shop had become a global powerhouse in less than 2 decades. It was an extraordinary transformation. In 1959, Honda established American Honda Motor Company. The goal was to sell motorcycles in the United States, the world's largest market. But America already had a strong motorcycle culture. Harley-Davidson dominated the large motorcycle market. British brands like Triumph and Norton were popular. Why would Americans buy Japanese motorcycles? Honda's strategy was brilliant. Rather than competing directly with Harley-Davidson and British brands for the serious motorcyclist market, Honda targeted everyone else. Their slogan became, "You meet the nicest people on a Honda." This was revolutionary. Motorcycles in America were associated with tough guys and rebels. Honda's advertising showed ordinary people, teachers, students, shopkeepers, enjoying Honda motorcycles. The Honda Super Cub became the centerpiece of this strategy. The Super Cub was a small, economical motorcycle with a step-through frame that made it easy to mount and ride. It had an automatic clutch, making it simple for beginners. It was clean and quiet, with an enclosed chain that didn't fling oil on the rider's clothes. It was the opposite of a large, loud Harley-Davidson. Americans were skeptical at first. These small Japanese motorcycles didn't fit the American image of what a motorcycle should be. They weren't big, loud, or powerful, but they were practical, reliable, and inexpensive. College students bought them for commuting to class. Workers used them for short trips. People discovered that motorcycles didn't have to be intimidating to be useful. Sales grew slowly at first, then accelerated. By the mid-1960s, Honda was selling hundreds of thousands of motorcycles annually in America. The Super Cub became one of the best-selling motor vehicles in history. Over 100 million Super Cubs have been sold worldwide since its introduction in 1958. It's the best-selling motor vehicle ever made, surpassing even the Volkswagen Beetle and Ford Model T. Honda's success in America opened doors for other Japanese manufacturers. Yamaha, Suzuki, and Kawasaki followed Honda into the American market. But Honda had established a template: make products reliable and affordable, market to ordinary people, not just enthusiasts, provide excellent dealer support and parts availability. These principles worked for motorcycles and would later work for cars. American Honda also established a pattern that Honda would follow in other markets. Rather than simply exporting products from Japan, Honda built a local presence. American Honda employed Americans, supported American dealers, and eventually built manufacturing facilities in America. This made Honda an American company in many ways, even though it was Japanese-owned. The American market taught Honda valuable lessons. Americans wanted different products than Japanese customers. American roads were longer and straighter. Americans preferred larger, more powerful vehicles. Honda learned to adapt products for different markets rather than try and sell identical products everywhere. This flexibility became a key to Honda's global success. By the late 1960s, Honda was the world's largest motorcycle manufacturer. The company that had started with motorized bicycles now produced over 1 million motorcycles annually. Production facilities expanded. New models appeared regularly. Honda had achieved in 20 years what established manufacturers had taken 50 years or more to accomplish. But Soichiro Honda wasn't satisfied with motorcycles. He had always been interested in cars. Throughout the 1950s, while building the motorcycle business, he had been thinking about automobiles. He knew that entering the automobile business would be incredibly difficult. Motorcycles were one thing. Cars were something entirely different. But Honda loved challenges. The bigger the challenge, the more it interested him. Honda's first automobile was a tiny truck called the T360, introduced in 1963. It had a 356 cubic centimeters, four-cylinder engine producing 30 horsepower. That's less power than many modern lawn mowers, but it was enough to carry cargo in crowded Japanese cities. The T360 used a chain drive like a motorcycle and could carry 350 kilograms of cargo. It was crude but practical. The S500 sports car followed in 1963. This was the car that showed Honda's true ambitions. The S500 had a 531 cubic centimeters, four-cylinder engine that revved to 9,500 revolutions per minute. Extraordinary for time. It produced 44 horsepower, giving the lightweight sports car impressive performance. The engine felt more like a motorcycle engine than a car engine, which made sense given Honda's experience. These early cars were sold only in Japan. Honda knew they weren't ready for export markets. They were learning how to build cars, and these first attempts were experiments as much as products. But they were real automobiles designed from scratch by Honda engineers. They established that Honda could build cars, even if those cars weren't yet competitive with established manufacturers. The S600 replaced the S500 in 1964. It had a larger 606 cubic centimeters engine, producing 57 horsepower. The engine still revved to 9,000 revolutions per minute, remarkably high for a car engine. The S600 could reach 90 miles per hour, impressive for such a small car. It was fun to drive, with responsive handling and a willing engine. Enthusiasts appreciated the S600 even if it wasn't practical for everyone. In 1967, Honda introduced the N360, a tiny car designed for city use. The N360 had a 354 cubic centimeters, two-cylinder engine and could seat 4 people in minimal space. It wasn't luxurious or fast, but was affordable and economical. The N360 became popular in Japan, where small cars made sense for crowded cities and expensive gasoline. Over 600,000 N360S were sold. These early cars taught Honda how to manufacture automobiles at scale. Building thousands of cars was entirely different from building prototypes. Manufacturing processes had to be developed, quality control systems had to be implemented, supplier networks had to be established. Honda was learning by doing, making mistakes and fixing them. The Honda 1300, introduced in 1969, was Honda's first attempt at a larger car. It used an air-cooled engine, like a Volkswagen Beetle, which seemed unusual for a Japanese car. Most Japanese manufacturers use water-cooled engines, but Honda believed air cooling would be simpler and more reliable. The 1300 was technically interesting, but not commercially successful. It taught Honda that technical cleverness was enough. Cars had to meet customer expectations. Throughout the 1960s, Honda was also dealing with pressure from the Japanese government. MITI, the Ministry of International Trade and Industry, wanted to consolidate the Japanese auto industry. They believed Japan had too many small car manufacturers and wanted them to merge into a few large companies. Honda was one of the manufacturers targeted for merger. Soichiro Honda resisted fiercely. He had built his company from nothing and refused to hand it over to government bureaucrats who thought they knew better than the people actually building products. Honda's resistance to MITI became legendary. He argued that competition between many manufacturers would drive innovation better than consolidation into a few large companies. Eventually, MITI backed down, and Honda remained independent. This independence allowed Honda to pursue its own vision rather than being absorbed into a larger company and losing its identity. Honda's unique engineering culture and willingness to take risks might not have survived a merger. The company's later success validated Soichiro Honda's resistance to government pressure. Competition did drive innovation, exactly as he had argued. By 1970, Honda had learned enough about building cars to be ready for the next step, exporting to America. The American market was vastly larger than Japan's. Success in America could transform Honda into a major automobile manufacturer. But Americans had high expectations. Honda's cars would have to compete with established American, European, and Japanese manufacturers. The challenge was enormous, but Honda had never avoided challenges. The Honda Civic, introduced in 1972, was a car that established Honda as a serious automobile manufacturer. It was designed specifically for export markets, particularly America. Honda engineers studied what Americans wanted in a small car and designed the Civic to meet those needs. It was larger and more comfortable than Honda's previous cars, while still being economical and easy to park. The Civic had a 1.2-liter four-cylinder engine producing 50 horsepower. That doesn't sound impressive, but the lightweight Civic was surprisingly quick. More importantly, it achieved remarkable fuel economy. The early 1970s were a time of rising gasoline prices and concerns about fuel availability. The Civic's economy suddenly became very attractive to American buyers. The 1973 oil crisis made the Civic a sensation. When gasoline prices spiked and supplies became uncertain, Americans suddenly wanted fuel-efficient cars. Detroit's offerings were mostly large, thirsty vehicles. The Civic's small, efficient engine was perfect for the moment. Honda couldn't build Civics fast enough to meet demand. Waiting lists developed. The Civic became a symbol of practicality and foresight. But the Civic's success wasn't just about timing and fuel economy. It was also well-built and reliable. Early Japanese cars had reputations for poor quality, but Honda had learned from previous mistakes. The Civic was assembled carefully with good materials. Things fit properly. It didn't rattle or leak. It started reliably and ran smoothly. Owners discovered that Japanese quality had improved dramatically. The Civic also introduced the CVCC engine in 1975. CVCC stood for Compound Vortex Controlled Combustion, a technology that allowed the engine to meet emission standards without a catalytic converter. At a time when American manufacturers were struggling to meet emissions requirements, Honda had developed a clever solution. The CVCC engine demonstrated Honda's engineering creativity and capability. The CVCC used a small auxiliary combustion chamber next to the main combustion chamber. A rich fuel mixture burned in the auxiliary chamber, creating a torch that ignited the lean mixture in the main chamber. This allowed the engine to run very lean overall, producing low emissions naturally rather than requiring complex exhaust treatment. It was elegant engineering that solved a difficult problem. American manufacturers were impressed and skeptical in equal measure. How had a small Japanese company solved emission problems that were challenging Detroit's best engineers? Some believed Honda must be cheating somehow. EPA testing proved the CVCC worked exactly as Honda claimed. This earned Honda enormous respect and credibility. If Honda could out-engineer Detroit on emissions, what else might they accomplish? The Civic quickly became one of America's best-selling small cars. It established Honda's reputation for building quality, efficient, reliable vehicles. Consumer Reports consistently rated the Civic as a recommended buy. Owners told friends about their positive experiences. Honda's reputation grew through word of mouth as much as advertising. Satisfied customers became Honda's best marketing. Honda expanded Civic production rapidly, building new factories in Japan to meet demand. But Soichiro Honda and Takeo Fujisawa knew that exporting from Japan had limitations. Currency fluctuations affected pricing. Shipping added costs. Trade tensions could threaten access to foreign markets. To truly succeed globally, Honda needed to build cars where they were sold. In 1982, Honda opened its first automobile assembly plant in America in Marysville, Ohio. This was a bold move. Japanese quality came from Japanese workers and Japanese management, many believed. Building cars in America with American workers might not produce the same quality. Honda believed that their manufacturing systems and quality culture could work anywhere with proper training and commitment. The Marysville plant initially built the Accord, which had been introduced in 1976 as a larger companion to the Civic. American workers learned Honda production methods. Quality was emphasized from day one. Every worker was expected to stop the line if they spotted a problem. This was radical in American manufacturing, where production volume often mattered more than quality. But Honda insisted that quality couldn't be inspected in. It had to be built in. The American-built Accords were just as good as Japanese-built ones. In fact, some American Accords were exported back to Japan, the ultimate validation that Honda's manufacturing methods worked anywhere. The Marysville plant succeeded beyond expectations, eventually expanding to build engines and other components. It proved that Honda's success wasn't about being Japanese. It was about having the right systems and culture. Honda has always invested heavily in research and development. Soichiro Honda believed that engineering excellence was a foundation of success. He encouraged engineers to experiment, to try new approaches, even if they might fail. Some experiments led nowhere, but some became breakthrough technologies. The CVCC engine was one example. Honda's VTEC technology was another. VTEC, or Variable Valve Timing and Lift Electronic Control, was introduced in 1989. The technology allowed the engine to change its valve timing and lift characteristics based on RPM and load. At low RPM, the engine used valve timing optimized for fuel economy and smooth operation. At high RPM, it switched to aggressive valve timing optimized for power. This gave drivers the best of both worlds, economy when cruising, power when needed. The switch between modes was dramatic in early VTC engines. At around 5,500 revolutions per minute, the engine would suddenly come alive, pulling harder and revving eagerly. Enthusiasts called it VTEC kicking in, and it became legendary among Honda fans. VTEC engines could produce impressive power from relatively small displacements while still being efficient and clean. VTEC technology evolved over the years, becoming more sophisticated and less abrupt. Modern VTEC systems continuously vary valve timing rather than having just two modes. But the basic concept remained. Optimize the engine for different operating conditions rather than compromising on a single valve timing that works adequately everywhere. This willingness to add complexity for better performance characterizes Honda's engineering philosophy. Honda also pioneered other technologies. The aluminum body NSX supercar, introduced in 1990, proved that exotic cars didn't have to be temperamental and unreliable. The NSX was designed to be as reliable and easy to drive as a Civic while providing supercar performance. It used a V6 engine and all-aluminum construction to achieve lightweight and excellent balance. The NSX changed expectations for exotic cars. Before the NSX, supercars were expected to be difficult. They wouldn't start reliably. They needed constant maintenance. They were impractical for daily driving. The NSX demonstrated that modern engineering could create a car that was exotic yet practical. It influenced an entire generation of supercar design, pushing competitors to improve reliability and usability. Honda's hybrid technology appeared in the Insight, introduced in 1999. The Insight was America's first production hybrid vehicle, beating the Toyota Prius to market by months. The Insight used a small electric motor to assist a 3-cylinder gasoline engine, achieving extraordinary fuel economy. Early Insights could exceed 70 miles per gallon in careful driving. The Insight was more of a technical showcase than a commercial success. Its 2-seat configuration limited practicality, but it demonstrated that Honda could develop advanced hybrid technology. When hybrid vehicle became popular later, Honda had the experience to compete effectively. The Insight and later hybrid Civics and Accord showed Honda's commitment to efficiency and environmental responsibility. Honda also invested in hydrogen fuel cell technology, something few manufacturers pursued seriously. The FCX Clarity, introduced in 2008, was one of the first production fuel cell vehicles available to retail customers. Very few were sold. Fuel cell vehicles face enormous infrastructure challenges, but Honda believed in exploring all possible paths to sustainable transportation. This willingness to invest in technologies that might not pay off immediately reflects Soichiro Honda's legacy. He believed in pursuing engineering excellence regardless of short-term costs. If hydrogen fuel cells proved to be the future, Honda wanted to be ready. If they didn't, the engineering knowledge gained would still be valuable. This long-term perspective on research and development has kept Honda at the forefront of automotive technology. Honda's reputation for reliability became legendary. Consumer Reports consistently rated Honda and its luxury brand Acura among the most reliable vehicles. Owners reported fewer problems and lower repair costs than most competitors. This reliability wasn't accidental. It came from careful engineering, quality materials, and rigorous testing. Every component was designed to last. Assembly quality was maintained through worker training and quality culture. The company's focus on engineering rather than marketing distinguished it from some competitors. While other manufacturers emphasized styling or brand image, Honda emphasized that their products were simply better engineered. They worked better, lasted longer, and required less maintenance. This message resonated with practical buyers who wanted transportation they could depend on. Honda hasn't always been successful. The company has made mistakes and faced challenges. In the 1990s and early 2000s, some Honda models developed reputations for transmission problems. The automatic transmissions in V6 Accords and Odyssey minivans from this era were prone to failure. This was embarrassing for a company known for reliability. Honda's response showed their commitment to customers. They extended warranties, repaired or replaced transmissions, and redesigned the transmission to fix the underlying problems. They took responsibility rather than denying the issue. While the transmission problems damaged Honda's reputation temporarily, their honest response and genuine fixes prevented lasting harm. The company also struggled initially with pickup trucks. The first Honda Ridgeline, introduced in 2006, was unlike any other truck. It had a transverse engine, independent suspension, and a trunk under the bed. Traditional truck buyers found it strange. Sales were disappointing. Honda had misjudged the truck market, where buyers wanted traditional body-on-frame designs. The second-generation Ridgeline, introduced in 2017, was more successful. It kept the independent suspension and innovative features, but looked more like a conventional truck. Honda learned that innovation had to be balanced with market expectations. Being different was valuable only if customers appreciated the differences. Sometimes conventional was better. Honda's relationship with Formula One racing has been mixed. They achieved great success in the 1980s and early 1990s, with their engines powering multiple championship-winning cars. But later F1 efforts were less successful. Honda spent enormous sums developing engines that couldn't compete. In 2008, Honda withdrew from Formula One entirely due to poor results and the global financial crisis. However, Honda returned to Formula One in 2015, initially struggling before eventually developing competitive hybrid power units. The commitment to racing remained even when results were poor. Racing is expensive and doesn't always produce immediate returns, but Honda believes it drives engineering forward and maintains the company's competitive spirit. The 2008 financial crisis hit Honda hard. Like all automakers, sales plummeted. Honda closed factories and reduced production, but the company weathered the crisis without government assistance, unlike some competitors. Honda's conservative financial management and strong balance sheet allowed them to survive without bailouts. This financial discipline reflected the cautious management philosophy established by Takeo Fujisawa decades earlier. Honda has also faced criticism for being slow to embrace modern trends. The company resisted turbocharging when competitors were rapidly adopting it. Honda argued that naturally aspirated engines were smoother, more reliable, and adequate for most customers. Eventually, market realities forced Honda to develop turbocharged engines, but they were later to the trend than many competitors. Similarly, Honda was skeptical of diesel engines, which are popular in Europe. While European and Korean manufacturers invested heavily in diesel technology, Honda focused on gasoline engines and hybrids. This decision looked questionable for years, but recent diesel emission scandals vindicated Honda's choice. Honda avoided the reputational damage that struck manufacturers who had heavily promoted diesel. The company has had to adapt to changing customer preferences. Americans increasingly wanted SUVs and crossovers rather than sedans. Honda's initial SUV offerings were unconventional. The CR-V and Pilot used car-based platforms when most SUVs were truck-based, but Honda's approach proved prescient. As customers wanted SUVs that drove more like cars, Honda's car-based SUVs became very popular. Honda also had to adapt to increasing government regulations. Fuel economy standards, emissions requirements, and safety regulations all became more stringent over the decades. Honda generally handled these challenges well, often exceeding requirements rather than just meeting them. The company's engineering strength allowed them to turn regulatory challenges into competitive advantages. Looking to the future, Honda faces a challenge of electrification. The automotive industry is shifting toward electric vehicles, and Honda must transform from a company known for excellent gasoline engines to one that builds competitive electric vehicles. This is an enormous challenge, requiring new technologies, manufacturing processes, and supplier relationships. Honda has announced plans to phase out gasoline-only vehicles by 2040, transitioning to electric and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. This represents a fundamental transformation of the company. The engineering culture that produced VTEC engines and high-revving motorcycles must now create compelling electric vehicles. It's perhaps the biggest challenge Honda has faced since entering the automobile business. Today, Honda is one of the world's largest manufacturers of motorcycles and automobiles. The company employs over 200,000 people worldwide. Honda products are sold in nearly every country. The company that started in a small workshop now operates factories on multiple continents. Manufacturing facilities in America, Europe, Asia, and South America produce millions of vehicles annually. But size hasn't changed Honda's fundamental character. The company still values engineering excellence above marketing flash. Products are designed to be reliable and well-built rather than simply fashionable. This philosophy comes directly from Soichiro Honda, who insisted that products should speak for themselves through quality and performance. Honda's success story is remarkable because it happened so quickly. From motorized bicycles in 1948 to one of the world's premier manufacturers by the 1980s. Just 3 decades. This compressed timeline shows what focused effort, engineering talent, and determination can accomplish. Honda succeeded not by copying others, but by developing unique solutions to problems. The company's influence extends beyond their own products. Honda's success helped change perceptions of Japanese manufacturing worldwide. If Honda could build world-class motorcycles and cars, maybe Japan could build world-class products in other industries too. Honda was part of the larger story of Japan's post-war economic miracle. Soichiro Honda's legacy lives on in the company's culture. Although he retired in 1973 and passed away in 1991, his philosophy still guides the company. Honda engineers are encouraged to take risks, to try unconventional approaches, to pursue engineering excellence. This culture has produced innovations like VTEC, the NSX, and the company's pioneering hybrid technology. As you drift towards sleep, perhaps you're thinking about a Honda you've owned or driven. Maybe it was a Civic that refused to quit despite minimal maintenance. Maybe it was a reliable Accord that carried your family for years. Or perhaps a motorcycle that provided the freedom of the open road. Whatever your connection to Honda, you're part of the story that began in a small Japanese workshop. Rest peacefully now. Let these thoughts fade as sleep approaches. Feel your breathing slow and deepen. Notice the weight of your body. Completely relax against the mattress. Your mind is quiet. Your muscles are at ease. Tomorrow is distant. For now, there's only rest. Sleep deeply. Dream gently. And may you wake refreshed and ready for the road ahead. Good night.